Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that video from NASA showing a lot of cool imagery of how the oceans help to drive our climate. But now we're going to get into this question of how does sun position dictate the seasons in the northern and southern hemisphere? So it all has to do with this phenomenon called axial tilt. The Earth, as you may or may not know, um, spins in an orbit around the sun, but our spin, our Earth is not straight up and down as it rotates around the sun, but it actually has a bit of a tilt to the tune of about 23.5 degrees. This little GIF here is not to scale. The sun is way too small and the Earth is way too large. But it kind of gives you an idea that during certain parts of the year, the northern hemisphere is more tilted towards the sun, and then during certain parts of the year, the southern hemisphere is tilted more towards the sun. And that's what causes uh, seasons to occur here on Earth. So let's stop that GIF and take a look at this axial tilt. Again, this image is very, very far off from being on scale because the Earth is much, much, much smaller than the sun and much, much further away than this image would show. But with this axial tilt of the poles, you can see that when the northern hemisphere is tilted towards the sun, that is our summertime. And then as we move through our orbit around the sun, during part of the year, the southern hemisphere is more tilted towards the sun, and that is their winter, their summer, our winter. Okay, so what things does life require? We've spent a lot of time this semester talking about processes that all living organisms undergo. But if we really boil it down, if we distill it to just four things, what do all living things require for life? And there are basically four. Nutrients and energy, basically food, we use for nutrients and energy. Well, what's the difference? Well, nutrients are things that we incorporate, and maybe we break some of those things down and use them for energy, but we also need to use those nutrients for our building materials for our own bodies. So if we want to build new proteins, we have to have the building blocks, the amino acids, coming from somewhere else. If we need to heal our bodies, if we get a cut or something, we need to build new skin proteins. We need to build new blood vessels and things like that. And where do we get those building blocks from? We get them from our food. But we also use the food that we eat as a source of energy, as we talked about in our chapter on cellular respiration. You know that you consume things that contain glucose, and we can convert that into ATP energy. Another thing that life requires is water. All life as we know it here on the planet Earth requires water. We spent a good chunk of the second chapter on biological molecules talking about the importance of water and water chemistry. We know that we need water for a myriad of different chemical reactions, including dehydration synthesis to build up our molecules, or hydrolysis to break molecules down. But water is very, very important for all living things. And that's why when we are searching for extraterrestrial intelligence or just extraterrestrial life using powerful telescopes, one of the first things we look for is the presence of water, because we know that water can sustain life and is absolutely essential for sustaining life here on Earth. And the last thing that life requires is having appropriate temperatures. All living things need to exist within a certain range of temperatures, and that may vary. As you go towards the polar regions and you find things like penguins towards the South Pole or puffins towards the North Pole, they need to live at temperatures that you and I would probably consider to be uncomfortably chilly, a bit too cold. But that's what they're adapted for. They don't seem to mind it because that's what they're adapted to. Organisms that live towards the equator are adapted towards living at much higher average temperatures. And different species have different ranges of temperatures that they consider to be appropriate. Some organisms work, for example, different species of bacteria can live very close to the boiling point of water, like in hot springs in Yellowstone Park, for example, where there's a lot of geothermal activity. So different organisms have different temperature, maxima, minima, optima, the highest they can stand, the lowest that they can stand, and the best conditions for them temperature-wise. So those are the 4 requirements of life. Moving right along. Okay, so now we're going to get into different ecosystems. And I'm going to start by talking about different marine ecosystems. I'm going to show you a little video about the Great Barrier Reef, and then I will talk about these other 2. But to start, within the marine habitats, which make up most of the life on Earth, most of the massive land on Earth is covered by oceans. We have a fairly small amount of intertidal and near-shore zones. These tend to get a very steady flow of nutrients from the shore. Rivers flowing into the sea wash nutrients from terrestrial habitats into those ecosystems. And that helps to provide for a great biodiversity. They also tend to be very shallow water, so light can penetrate into that water, and that means that photosynthesis can occur. So intertidal and nearshore zones include areas like beaches, coral reefs, mangrove forests, kelp forests, and the list goes on as to what these intertidal and nearshore zones are, how they are manifest. But I have a few pictures to show. So here, for example, this is a mangrove forest in Puerto Rico. Mangroves are different species of trees, and you can see here's a clump of them. They are one of the most salt-tolerant plants in the world, so they can actually put their roots down in some fairly salty water, and they can produce little islands, but while they're producing these islands, their roots can be habitat for a number of different marine species like sponges and corals and fishes and things like that. So the next video I want to show you is about the Great Barrier Reef, and you may have heard that the Great Barrier Reef is dead. But what does that mean? So I'm going to show you this video, and then I'm going to come back and talk about the other 2 types of habitats within the marine environment.